Yeah, well, in yourself. Is it good morning or good evening? Good afternoon. Where are you?
It's good afternoon. I'm in Miami at the moment.
Ah, Miami. Cool, man. What's happening?
This is gonna be fun. I'm just gonna tweet out quickly that I'm live with you, and then everyone
Cool.
hopefully join
Yeah,
us.
I'll do the
Um,
same. Has Waitroom got an
Thanks,
Instagram account?
everyone's getting in. We do just tag. I think it's at Waitroom. Or yeah, I think it's at Waitroom. Let's go. And you're still in France, right?
Yeah, I got to Toulouse this afternoon. I
Awesome.
was in London for um London for 2 days, and up down to Lille, and then Lens yesterday, and then I've got a flight this morning to Toulouse, so all good, man. All good. Exciting times.
That's awesome. Good to see you, man. It's been a while.
It has been a while, man. It's just, I'm trying to think. In person was
Pre-COVID, pre-COVID.
December
It was
2019. December
Yeah,
2019.
October. Was it October or was it
No, it was
December?
after the World Cup. No, we saw myself and Mike at dinner with you in Santon.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
wow,
yeah.
that was a
Yeah.
while.
And I'll actually chat a bit
Okay,
about that now.
yeah. I'll
Uh,
we definitely add that to. Okay, so let's guys, we can get some people to join the queue. That'd be great. We've got 21 viewers so far. It's fantastic. Uh,
what's your top hit been so far in terms of viewership?
Vusi got us like 500 people, I think.
Oh wow, yeah. I'm not quite Vusi Timber quiet
No,
at the
but
moment, so
no, you are, you
I'd
are.
love to say we're gonna, but probably not gonna get to 500. Eh?
No. It's all good. It's all good. No, Vusi's got a huge social media following, so it
Mm,
makes a difference when he like just pings everyone and they just kind of swarm on
yeah,
him. But you're a living legend, so
thanks.
as I like to call you. And
No,
one
I
of the nicest
see.
one of the nicest guys I've met, Brian. Seriously, out of all the sportsmen and people I've met worldwide, you're like the most humble guy. It's
You
quite
met the wrong
impressive.
people, Vinny. You met the wrong people. You didn't meet the South African rugby players. No, I think I'm extremely grateful. I think both of us, South Africa is obviously, deep in our blood, and I'm grateful to have had sport literally impact my life. I'm not quite sure if you remember where you were in '95, but I was lucky enough to be sitting in that stadium on the 24th of June,
Wow.
and it changed my life. Absolutely changed my life, and I'm grateful that I got to call my passion, my job for just over the better part of 16 years. But yeah, now in the transition period and things
How old
are
were you? How old were you back then? That was like you were 12 or 13?
95, 13. Yeah, 13 years
13
old,
years
just
old.
turned
Okay.
13. Yeah.
I was 17. I was sitting in the Spur in King Williamstown watching the game. And
Incredible.
it was I'll never forget it. I mean, it was actually a funny little side story. I had a 50 rand bet on South Africa winning, and but it was after regular time, and so because it went to
Okay.
overtime, I didn't get paid, and I thought I won. I was like, man,
No,
I won! That's
no,
crazy.
your dad got you bad there. Your dad got you bad there.
Yeah, yeah. We should take in the lift the cup one, but it was
Uh,
great. Let's jump into talking about the last World Cup and obviously since then you've retired from SA Rugby, but let's talk about the journey and what a high it was for a few minutes.
so I think for me, Vinny, I was very fortunate. The transition period, I retired in 2018, and it's the transition period in general is this massive talking point, amongst all professional athletes, and it is a scary one. It's, you almost die a bit of a death, they say. When, you leave one chapter behind, you have to start another one. And I think 2019 for me was a phenomenal year, just in terms of building relationships, getting to understand a little bit of business, dabbling in a few things, not having to go into a full-time job.
Mm.
Try dabble in the entrepreneurial space while still having the opportunity to do broadcasting in the United Kingdom, working with the likes of MasterCard, HSBC, traveling the world. And I got to be in Japan for 6 of the 7 weeks, and getting to witness the Springbok journey, getting to be on that field and seeing history being made by, Makazole Mapimpi scoring, becoming the first Springbok to score a try in a Rugby World Cup final. Then to see Sia, who was then first black captain to have captained the country, but to go on and win it. And that phenomenal, inspirational story was exceptional. I got emotional on various levels throughout the course that week. And because rugby had meant so much in my life, because rugby had given me so much and inspired me, but then allowed me to be inspiration and then to witness, being inspired again. It was phenomenal. It really was phenomenal. But a funny story, and I know we had dinner in December 2019, but it was post that Rugby World Cup where I was like, surely it's an opportunity here, because I'm not in the entrepreneurial space, and not one of these, rugby playing Springboks that have just won a World Cup have their own .com website or domain. And I was like, me and Mike were like, and Vinny was like, Bryan, we need to get you on billboards. I'm like, no, we need to get these guys, we need to get these guys a web page. And we actually started a business out of that called MatchKit, which, is this very easy website building tool for professional athletes where, we've allowed South Africans that, because of the way our sporting codes are run, weren't going to the Olympics to raise funds through crowdfunding, raise awareness. And yes, it's been incredible in that, in terms of that and the entrepreneurial journey. But life has been exceptionally good for me. I think learning the hard yards of starting a company, 2 months pre-COVID with my fintech company called Pay Me Now, while still trying to do MatchKit and pump that at a time where, the world was shutting down, sport globally was shutting down, but also finding opportunities in those moments was exceptional. A lot of people say you get taught these skills in professional sport that, if applied correctly, make you a success. That's unfortunately not always the case. Not all of those tangible skills are transferable. You're in this high performance environment where you're potentially financially and physically invested in a business as a founder or director or a shareholder, and then managing employees where they're not all driven like a team. And people say, oh, we need this family culture, but it's like, we need a team. We need everyone being the best them that they can be to be able to grow with the success of the business. So it's been an incredible journey, to get a fintech literally in these tough times, breaking even, growing a company from 4 guys in a 15 square meter office to 23 full-time staff with about 14 to 16 backroom consultants, has been challenging but extremely rewarding, and I'm grateful for that journey, while also still sort of at times doing some stuff. And I'm actually in Toulouse at the moment for HSBC work this weekend for the 7th. So grateful to still be a part of the game in some ways, Vinny, but also getting to learn at the coalface in others.
No, Bryan, that's great, and the stuff you do with MatchKit's amazing. It's just going from strength to strength. So I'm really, really excited to see that, and proud of you, man. It's not many sports that make a successful transition from sports into entrepreneurship, right? So it's one of those, like, you really are forging new ground in many respects, especially tech entrepreneurship. It's one thing to go into. There's lots of things you can do in the PR and media space, but getting into tech is quite a challenge. You've done a great job so far.
I think I'm also fortunate. There've actually been quite a few that I've sort of come across that you didn't expect. Someone like Bobby Skinsat,
Bobby's
and his role.
Bobby's great.
Yeah, with his role with Draper Gain that he had, we actually had quite a few conversations, and the intellectual capacity that he's now sort of formed in terms of understanding, being able to get valuations, what metrics are valuations based on, is it a 5, is it a 6, is it a 20 multiple revenue looking at, what are you looking at in terms of an exit strategy? So there are various guys that have done extremely well from an entrepreneurial journey. And like I say, you try to learn as much as possible. And I think for me, that's probably been the biggest positive, is that because you've been involved in this high performance environment for such a long period of time, you're never happy with just average. So yes, you unfortunately, and it's an interesting one when people talk about balance, because to be successful in anything, balance is a very skewed concept, because if you're not going to put in the hours of dedication, and I understand there's mental and physical, well-being and wellness that one has to look at, but it's a little bit of a different element of like when you're physically and financially invested in company, and if you're not burning the midnight oil, but also then you can't expect your employees who aren't as invested in as you financially and physically, you can't expect them to do, 8, 9 o'clock at night calls, or, expect them to do with the tech team to, 2 a.m. deployments. So I think there's elements of transferable skills that have been great, and I'm fortunate to be surrounded by great people. With Mike Sharman and the team at MatchKit, but then also the Play Me Now team, Dion Nobriga and our two tech co-founders in Willem van Sale and Jerry Potgieter, who have been incredible, along with an incredible sort of majority shareholder that took a gamble on us, in a space with regards to earned wage access that was this very new in South Africa. So it's been challenging. It's been a real grind, but I think the reward of getting to a point where you're breaking even, slowly but surely, incrementally, farming and growing your bottom line and your profit. Not quite unicorn status. I'm not quite sure where we want to go there, but then start looking at geographic expansion and getting into certain other territories, which is really exciting. So very fortunate. Again, for me, I couldn't have done this on my own, and I'm very grateful that I have been involved in team setups post-retiring, whether that be in my broadcasting or with Mascot or with HSBC or now in the entrepreneurial journey. It's, again, one person on their own can't do it. I know Elon Musk is pretty vocal at the moment, but even he has a team around him, which I think is.
Well, he has a huge team around him. He has a huge team around him,
which contributes to success.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about the team. Let's jump into Waitroom for a bit. I want to get the queue going. I think David Berman's up next, and then anyone else who wants to join up. And then if we run out of people to chat to, we can just jump back in and do a few, because I know a lot of people like to lurk. It's late at night as well, so let's go.
Yeah, let's start.
David, welcome.
Thanks, Vinny. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Okay. Hi, Bryan.
Nice jersey.
No, very good, man. It doesn't fit me very well. I think it's from the anyway. But
I'm happy you're not wearing a Sharks jersey, Mr. Berman.
No.
We won't go there.
I wouldn't do that to you. You screwed us once. I can't deal with that. I don't want to talk about that. My kids are still traumatized by that try you scored in the last minute. No, it wasn't.
Again, I've told you and many people this, like, they can't blame me. It's got to be Derek Hoford who kicked the winning points.
No, but the ref wasn't watching. He was blind or something. Was it Derek Hoford?
Probably. Yeah, 100%. All good, man.
Well, Bryan, first of all, to you, thanks for everything you've done for South Africa, and
thanks, sir.
You've been a great spokesman, and Vinny, this is a platform which Mark told me about. I wanted to see what it was like. I wanted to see how different this is to Zoom. How why I don't want to take away from Bryan Habana, talking to him, but I'm fascinated by how this works. It's so far it looks good. Maybe after we have a chat, you can just talk about it a little bit. I'd appreciate that. Sure. Bryan, so the transition, I mean, it's always hard for athletes, anyone who's done extremely well in a short period of time. And also the demands on you have been quite high. I'm sure you have to do a lot of talks like this and other talks. And then also your involvement in rugby, speaking to the teams and being involved in teams. And I think you're a TV commentator sometimes. So, I don't know how you find the time even to balance all that with your family and try and have a business. I mean, this whole thing, how do you even do that?
Yeah, so I'm going to try. So obviously it's like speed dating. We've got 43 seconds left, Mr. Berman. And, myself and Vinny tapped on it, sacrifice and, you yourself, extremely successful financial businessman over in the States, having left your roots in South Africa and gone to go do something else. Balance is unfortunately a very skewed thing. And, there's something that's got to give at point. And again, time with my family now, knowing that I've got a very short period to provide, as much fundamental foundations going forward. So it's about understanding that, equipping yourself with good people around you, for me personally, and, having that support structure, which I'm really grateful with my wife, who, can look after my boys and make our house a home. But yeah, I'm very blessed and very lucky, DB. So let's see how that goes.
Great. Well, you can always rejoin us. So let me just tell everyone how Waitroom works. So, and thanks, David, for prompting it. But Waitroom is basically it's a kind of like an Ask Me Anything platform where myself and Bryan, or Bryan could be up by himself having conversation with the audience. You all can just jump in the queue, ask us a question anytime, and it's got a time limit, so the conversation doesn't continue ad infinitum. It basically means that we have, so in this session is 2.5 minutes each, so you get 2.5 minutes to ask a question, respond, and then we move on. It keeps the conversation flowing, and in the case where we have 20 or 30 guests, everyone gets a quick chance to ask a question and engage with the speakers and the hosts. And that's the Waitroom platform. It's very different from Zoom, where you have 50 screens open at once. And it's actually, I think it's far more interactive
Yeah,
because you get to rotate.
Yeah, Vin, and I think of that. So I'm also, on quite a few, personalized video platforms where you can send shout outs and, people can pay a certain piece of money. And, this is obviously in the real infancy of, of the company, with regards to Waitroom. But I think what is cool is you don't always have that opportunity to engage with people, and, people don't always know, how to get a hold of you or in contact with you. They try, I've done various Instagram lives and, some other things, but I think what is great about Waitroom, there is that time limit. So, knowing beforehand, what question you want to ask and how you want to ask it, and then, prompting from there, how quickly you can go through. And I'm not quite Vusi Tembukwaya, who I think had 500 guests, on a few of his on his Waitroom sessions. He actually still owes me a coffee or dinner. We literally passed each other in New York and in London last week, and we did message each other, but we just didn't follow it up. So might have to have a session with Vusi at some time. But I think what is great about Waitroom is, we've all become used to this screen environment of, initials and, people being able to potentially distance themselves with a barrier that is a camera. But I think what is cool, because you don't always get to engage on a level with people that do things a little bit differently. And I think in that, I'm really, really enjoying, how this speed dating effort works.
Yeah, this is great. Okay, let's go to Michael. Thanks, Brian.
Hey, Brian. How's it going?
Hey, Mike. How you going, man? You well?
Yeah, good in yourself.
Very good, thank you.
So I've always had this this nagging question in the back of my head about sports people, especially yourself. You're pretty well known and you've got a really amazing record, and you're quite successful on the sporting field. But there are those that are professional but not as well known. Like, what do they end up doing when they retire or leave the field? Like, do they? And what are the opportunities that are usually that they follow in those areas?
Yeah, Mike, great question. I think firstly, I do, and I said it earlier, I do really understand how fortunate and privileged I am to, be involved in, ambassadorial work, broadcasting work, because, so when I retired, there was maybe, one or two positions open. There was maybe not any positions open. So to get an opportunity to work with HSBC or broadcasting, and I think there's a lot spoken about, especially now from a players' union perspective or representative perspective, in terms of how do you equip yourself with skills and tools for the life after. And I'll sort of chat about it a bit, potentially a little bit, how while you're in it, you feel invincible. I'm also at a very great perspective where, I was able to earn a lot of money through rugby, and that facilitated a great life for after it. So yeah, it's a difficult one that I don't have the answer to. I was never outside of the 15-man code. I'm doing a talk with the sevens and around financial fitness tomorrow, but it is upskilling yourself, trying to learn about where you can become good, because unfortunately, as much as you want to be a professional athlete for your whole life, it's virtually impossible unless you're an extremely good golfer and can play till you're 70 or 80 years old, and you're as good as Gary Player and the likes. But it is equipping yourself. I think for us as professional athletes, as rugby players, learning, educating yourself, knowing what a budget looks like, understanding how to read a forecast, putting, I didn't realize, and I chatted to Vinny in December 2020, that MVP stands for something other than most valuable player. I needed to learn in the fintech and digital world, it stood for minimum viable product. So it is about upskilling and equipping yourself to be able to handle that, and the realization that the money isn't always as valid in the sporting circles as it is in business.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. MVPs are, actually, it's a good topic. Minimum viable products, and effectively, Waitroom is an MVP, right? We built the product over the past couple of years, but what we launched is with the minimum that we felt we could take to market, and it took us a little longer than we expected, but there's a lot. Our roadmap's pretty packed. There's a whole bunch of features we need to bring in, and that we think is really interesting for the product. But it was more important to get this out there and get people starting to use it, giving us feedback. And that feedback loop is critical when it comes to building a company. And maybe you want to talk about some of the things that you learned from MatchKit that you didn't expect that people would ask for, but they already needed.
Yeah, so from MatchKit in particular, I think I had this concept of, I knew what it's like as a professional athlete to not struggle, but as much as I studied BSc IT, I never completed my degree, which I think, sort of hindered me in terms of building my own domain. I could have, spent time while I was playing, understanding, how iframes work and, what type of website building tools I want to use. Do you just use WordPress? It's a very easy website builder. But as a professional athlete, there's a very small percentage. You think of your Tiger Woods of the world, your Roger Federers, your Novak Djokovic's, your Lindsey Vaughns of the world, and your Dwayne Johnsons, who's more than just a sporting team. But there's maybe a 1 or 2% that can make revenue or something from a domain. But what about those plethora of school athletes that are sort of, they've got a following, they've got family that love them. And in South Africa, we do have, difficulties or barriers around crowdfunding. People, it's a struggle, in an emerging market economy. So, with MatchKit, we just had this idea, let's create a very simple, easy to use functionality around giving athletes the ability to showcase their own domain. Because we were like, imagine in a post-match interview, I can't go out as a rugby player and name all my individual sponsors. You put that on your Twitter, your Instagram feed, but you can't put links through it. So I think creating a website, creating a domain, showcasing who you are, potentially infringing on copyrights, stealing photos of Instagram, from a Getty or Gala images that you don't understand. So, you'd rather using something off YouTube that someone else created. And we look at that, but there was just various opportunities of saying, well, how do you keep the end user engaged? Because if you're going via Instagram, if you're going via Facebook, yes, you get the data pool, but, what is bringing that athlete back to MatchKit? So do you potentially then look at giving them an opportunity to get clothing or get branding of their own source out there? So you talk about a roadmap, Vinny. We had a concept of not one of these World Cup winning Springboks have their own .com, and I actually looked, and some of them were going for $100,000 as being sold on not the dark web, but being sold on various platforms. And I was like, well, how do we give someone something very easy to build, but then the stickiness of why do they need to come back? And be like, well, you create a brand, and then you say, well, let's give them education. So to your point, product roadmap, building a minimum viable product to test the market to see how that engagement. We had a massive, sort of media entry, and Mike Sharman's extremely good at that. But then we also looked at, well, how do we keep people engaged? How do we potentially give them their own little shop that they can sell merchandise? But then we looked at, well, people are wanting to raise money for COVID and food parcel delivery. And, we use Bryan Habana Foundation as an example where, people potentially didn't want to go via PayPal because it was too cumbersome, not only to pay in, but then to pay out as well. PayPal's not the easiest tool to use. So again, testing the waters, and we knew that there was something there. People were struggling. Athletes were not being given the audience. But then we said, that basic MVP is just not good enough. You have to branch out. You have to be able to give data and analytical insights to federations where, we initially potentially went purely B2C, and then we've sort of found out, well, B2B is actually a better model because then you can incumbently bring everyone together, give relatable data that can actually be then potentially used to try find sponsors on a unionized level instead of individuals, which I think was very important.
That's really great. Okay, let's go to Sean. I think you're in queue.
Hey Vinny, hey Bryan. Bryan, good to chat to you.
How you going?
Good man. Quick question for you. It was announced last week that the USA will be holding the 2030 something Rugby World Cup. Yeah, how do you feel the Americans, our brethren on across the further pond, are gonna accept rugby in their lives, especially with football, American football being so big?
Yeah, great question, Sean. I think it's amazing that World Rugby has made announcements, for the next 11 years. I do think it's a little bit sad that South Africa hasn't got the opportunity, and, post America 2031, South Africa wouldn't have actually hosted a World Cup for over 40 years. You think back, we chatted Vinny about 95. So, but everyone does understand that, America is the sleeping giant, particularly from a rugby perspective. We have the MLR and things going there that are tough. It hasn't sort of exponentially grown as everyone would have hoped, and I think it's going to be an interesting challenge. Vinny, you know how big America is, so to get from East Coast to West Coast, so logistics around how the World Cup will actually be played out is going to be really interesting to see how that goes. We saw in Japan, there were natural disasters. So there was a typhoon called Typhoon Hagibis that came through that cancelled 2 games, and I'm not quite sure, what time the hurricane typhoon season is, over on the west, the bottom northwest, southwest coast. But it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. 6 to 7 hours if you do things differently. But everyone does know that there is a lot of excitement around the growth of rugby, and I think, in my opinion, what has been exceptional is that because rugby sevens, and yes, it's a shorter format of the game, but because that has now been included in the Olympics, and we know how big the Olympic dream is for so many Americans, and with 350 odd million people there, if you can tap into 10-15% of that market, you've got an incredible following. So the MLR is slowly but surely progressing and making great strides. But as rugby sevens, I think, continues, and the American men and women's teams do really well, not only on the circuit but at the Olympics. I really do believe that the 2 World Cups being held there are going to be successful.
Yeah, it should be good. Hopefully they pick up, and it's popular. Thanks, Bryan. Thank you.
Yeah, as I mentioned to you, we spoke about this before, like the NRFL, National Rugby and Football League, setting up. There's a couple of interesting plays there. The biggest issue is the cultural change that needs to happen in America around rugby. Like, the biggest supporters of rugby in America are expats. So, Brits, New Zealanders, Australians, South Africans. And it hasn't really gone into the American culture yet. It's somewhat there. Like, there's some guys I meet to play rugby at school, at university or whatever, but it's not like a professional sport yet. America suffers from effectively like a long tail of sports problem, where the top 3 sports is basically football, baseball, and basketball, and then everything else is kind of like, even Major League Soccer is not the most lucrative sport.
I think again, it is cultural, but you talk about Major League Soccer, and you see what the American women's football team has done for the growth of the soccer game, not purely from a women's game, but purely from the game of soccer. You've got some global superstars, that have come out of that women's team, and I think that's exceptional. And you look at, how do you then infiltrate, various different potential demographics of ideology. And again, I've got nothing against American sport. I went to go watch a baseball game with my family and my 2 kids under 7 a couple of weeks ago, and I sat there just thinking, wow, this is really boring. And it's a legacy tradition, and people go there for the pretzels, for the beer, for the popcorn, because there's no in-game entertainment. Yes, you have the kiss cam and the screens, but unlike basketball or American football, where there's entertainment, there's guns getting shot with American football balls or T-shirts or into the stadium to involve the crowd capacity. So there's potential legacy issues around those that are staunch baseball supporters, for instance, that fill up Yankee Stadium or fill up various things. And it's about educating this new market around, how exciting sevens is, how exciting a Rugby World Cup is. And it's great to see that, you at least had, Joe Biden, vying for support in terms of Rugby World Cups that are going to be held there in the 2030s. And as the team, I think, starts progressing, I think that's going to be very important. So America as a team will need to, look at their infrastructure. They've got a former South African coach in Gary Gold, doing exceptionally well with their own, in developmental structures, which I hope will really play out. We've got to play them twice in a Rugby World Cup. It's gone really well for South Africa. Unfortunately, it hasn't gone well for America. But we've got some incredible players that have come out of there. You look at someone like Todd Clever, who sort of journeyed the world, was in South Africa, played for Lions. They went up for Europe. There's this cult figure that sort of really symbolizes what rugby's potential is in America. You have Dakutswe Ngwenya. I'm not quite sure if you remember 2007, Vinny, who ran around me in Montpellier, I think, and made a name for himself, got a club contract in France playing for Barrett. So the likes of a Chris Wiles, who went to Saracens and became incredibly successful there. And there's just so many of these players that can go on and achieve success. And as a group, you'd sort of hope that the American rugby team can continue doing that. I do think there's unfortunately a split at the moment between the American Rugby Union and sort of the MLR, the professional league of it, and making that work. And I think in conjunction with World Rugby and the eventual sponsors for those 2 World Cups happening over there, that you sort of feel logistics will come together in a way which is really pragmatic towards success more than anything else.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting point. So the one thing I remember seeing was that the U.S. World Cup, the Women's World Cup in 2019 had a viewership of 22% higher in the U.S. than the Men's World Cup in the U.S., which is quite fascinating, right? That wasn't the same for the rest of the world. I mean, the Men's World Cup is the biggest in soccer, but the women's was more watched. It was incredible. I was shocked to hear that there was that much support for it.
Yeah, but it comes down to that they get all the way to the final, they win.
Yeah, that's true.
The continued efforts of getting to quarterfinal, semi-final, final, but then to actually win it, and then be hero welcomed back to the country. And I think in this new way of having to unlearn about the old and learn about the new, and broaden your horizons and open your mind, but literally being able to, I look back when South Africa won the World Cup in 95 and inspired me, that American women's football team inspired a new generation of boys, girls, about the potential that can be achieved if you really work hard, are disciplined, prepare well, and in so doing, make sure that you're particularly doing things that are exciting. So, like I said, again, those stats, and you can potentially bend stats a little bit, but when it's a blatant stat like 26% heightened than what the men's were, you've got to believe it's true.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, that's some more people. Let's jump in the queue. Elizabeth. Hey, not Elizabeth. Hi.
I just look like that's Elizabeth.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Ask a question. Hi, Bryan. Big fan.
How you going?
Especially because half of my friends are from Cares. So
good. I'm hoping it's not because you went to JP.
No, I didn't. But I just had a very interesting, for me, interesting question. Like I said, I have a lot in rugby and everything, and I feel like with fitness and everything, and the whole discipline is just a whole other animal on its own. Do you feel like that's something that helped you to transition between, the business world and everything, that mental toughness, that pushing your body, can't push it, or going through things, or finishing a training session or a game? Do you feel like that's a mental skill that you brought over, and that it helped you, or, just some...
Yeah, quickly, sorry. Seeing that you're not Elizabeth, what's your name?
Oh, sorry, I'm Ross. Sorry.
Sorry, Ross. No, thanks, Ross. No, Ross, I think, again, I chatted about it earlier. There are certain elements of, sporting attributes and skills that, you can potentially transfer into corporate or business. It's not always applicable. And I think what you're sort of referring to is resilience, the ability to, get knocked down but stand up. I think when you're in business, getting knocked down is very different from being a professional athlete, because you can you get to play in another a rugby game another week. If you're not good enough, you get dropped, and then you have to work your way back up. In business, and I'm in the startup space at the moment. If you don't eventually start generating revenue and looking towards creating profit, at some point you have to then also be adult enough to say it's not working. Either I've got to do something different, or I've just got to say no, and you've got to sort of accept the consequences, where in professional sports, I think it's a little bit easier. There are definitely elements of it, but just because you're a great athlete or you're a successful athlete, it's not always going to mean you're going to become a successful business person. And I think it's around, again, upskilling yourself. Where do you thrive? Where do you find your passion outside of your sport? Do you love, the non-profit organizational space? Do you love giving back? Do you love, we see someone like Siya Kolisi has built this incredible brand globally, but his humility, he was in grade PE at his old school this weekend, and they renamed the field after him. He's become this global icon, yet he's remained humble. He engages with the community. He's giving back to the Kolisi Foundation. So it's not always meaning you're successful. It's about understanding where your passion is, how you cultivate that into success in the next form. And I think the biggest thing for me was learning that, unfortunately, as much as I would love to keep it that way, the money I was earning as a professional athlete, which was probably equivalent to a CEO of a business, if not more, is unfortunately not like that when you step into the corporate arena. And I think that is the real challenge around mentally, understanding the differentiation that is, but then, adjusting your life accordingly, because if you've, used to living a certain standard, and you don't have the means to continue living that standard, at some point, there's a there's a massive void, and if you're not prepared to pick that up, it becomes really tough.
Yeah. So there was a situation where the NBA, the National Basketball Association of America, issued a statement a couple of years ago saying that after 5 years, professional sportsmen, after they retire, they're broke after 5 years. Or bankrupt.
I mean,
60% of these guys went broke off.
I don't even know if it's that long, Vinny. I think it's actually a little bit less. I think in the first 2 years, it's something ridiculous, like a 57%, that declare bankruptcy. And it's difficult to comprehend how that works, when people are earning so much money, but you just, you think it goes on forever, and, that lavish lifestyle that you potentially become accustomed to, disappears. And I'd love to sort of put challenges out there for professional athletes around the world to say, if you can sort of maintain a standard of living that you did when you first entered the sport, where you were potentially not living in a 2, 3, 4 million rand, or 2, 3, 4, 5, $10 million house, when you become a professional athlete, and if you don't make proper investments. And I think the biggest thing is, if you're uneducated and you don't know how to read a budget, or you don't know how to look at forecasts, or you don't understand, how the markets are trending, potentially not diversifying your portfolio and, believing certain things, if you're entrusting other people with your money, and not sort of understanding that you need to keep an eye on it, you need to be able to know what the growth percentages are, you then are fully responsible for what happens to the depletion of those funds when you stop. Because, again, Shaq's probably a great example. LeBron James a great example of how they've sort of used their platform to generate even bigger businesses. But then you have someone like Mike Tyson, who was one of the wealthiest people alive, and or professional athletes anyway, and had to look at various things. We see what's happened with Boris now as well, Boris Becker. So it's not an easy one, and I don't have the answer. Like I said, I've been very fortunate that during my career, I built a brand that brands wanted to associate with post my career. I made a real conscious effort of upskilling myself from a verbal communication perspective, where if you're on a broadcast, people appreciate the manner in which you either eloquently or, appropriately bring a message across and engage with people. So again, I don't have the answers. I am grateful that I had people around me supporting the growth and, continuation of my brand. But it's not easy, and it's not a given that that I was going to be successful, to be blatantly honest.
Yeah, well, you've definitely beaten the odds in your career and after your career. Let's go to Tom.
Hey,
Tom, how's it going?
Hey, Bryan. It's an absolute pleasure to meet you. I've just got a quick question. So, you mentioned earlier that currently providing for your family is what's driving you, but I'm really interested to know, from someone with the accomplishments you have, what is your concept of success? Like, how do you feel like you've succeeded in yourself? And have you had that moment in your career where you kind of think, I don't know how it could get any better? And if you have, what was that moment?
Well, Tom, that's a few great questions. I'm going to start off with the top. I think I've had quite a bit of a heartache over the last while, where friends have passed, and you hear it constantly. But if you were to look at your life and you're no longer on earth, how would people see you? And what would you be proud of? And I think the more I can look at the manner in which I lived my life, whatever values I stood for, how people viewed me, and in so doing that, I potentially have left something that, if I was to pass on, that there is a foundation that my kids can potentially succeed on. So measuring success is a very subjective, individualistic thing. and the world tries to sort of box you, into a certain way of success. So it's not only purely about the money. Obviously, having money allows you to live a great life, allows you to provide, allows you to go to good schools, get good training, potentially differentiates you in a way that gives you a head start. But for me, money's not always, always the big sticking point. It's how people perceive you. It's how you leave the room, and people talk about you. And to leave a legacy for me is incredibly important. And like I said, there are moments in my career where I look back and, I'll never forget sitting in France in 2007. And I said to my wife, I'm going to retire in 2 years at 26 years old. And she looked at me, she's like, what? Why would you do that? She's like, no, I would have achieved everything. I'd won a World Cup, played against the Lions, hopefully won that Lions. And then I got to 26 years old and I was like, no, I want to go for a little bit longer, and push for another 8 years, Tom. So again, valuing yourself against your own understanding of what success is, building people around you that, you talk to, but that can appropriately build you up and potentially criticize you and keep you honest. But, measuring yourself almost on a daily basis, which I think is really important.
Great. Thanks, Bryan. And let's go to Lou.
Hey, Bryan. How you doing?
Hey, Lou. How you going?
Good, thanks. I'm kind of curious. Have you been following what's been going on with sort of sports teams and creating and selling player NFTs and this idea that in the future it's becoming increasingly likely that you'll have these digital twins of players and that you'll kind of have a representation of you with maybe all of your player stats that will be able to play digital versions of the games or the sport that you played in the future. And like, at what point in time is that something else versus you? And like, maybe, I don't know, Bryan Habana never actually retires because he lives forever in a digital form.
Yeah. So great question, Lou. I was the first South African athlete to create the NFT with Moment in, I think it was May last year, and raised a couple of 100,000 rand for the Bryan Habana Foundation. And yeah, it's an interesting way. It's one that really, again, to my point, if you don't understand, if you don't educate yourself around it, it becomes a very intangible one. I'm not quite sure in terms of the three of us, on this Waitroom. We remember playing with trading cards, and it was this real thing. And I'll never forget, at primary school, you could win someone else's trading card or player card if you could flip it over, like it was on the grass, and you'd have to do this thing where you flipped it over. So understanding the metaverse, understanding the way image rights are built out. At the moment, for instance, as a player, you have SA South Africa, for example, you have SA Rugby, you have My Players, which is a player association. You have the collective image rights component, you have the individual image rights component. So there's just so many intricate levels of understanding that you need to put in, understanding your worth. People are talking about the metaverse, and it's literally something that's not only on our doorstep, it has arrived already. And I know HSBC, for instance, have bought their first virtual space in the metaverse. So are NFTs going to take over playing cards? I don't know. Again, how do you value or measure art? Is it always in the eye of the beholder? Why would someone pay a couple of $1 million for a vape, but only $5,000 for a Bryan Habana NFT? So it is about understanding concepts, about educating yourself. Do I believe there's a place for it? I think blockchain technology, if you do understand it, is a way in which there can be longevity. Yes, in certain ways, unregulated at the moment, but I'm extremely excited about, where the world is going in terms of creating digital platforms for people to understand longevity, sustainability. The Mona Lisa's, sitting in the Louvre, it got painted so many years ago. If you can, if you tell anyone that thing will survive forever, a lot of us would love that. So how do you aptly educate yourself, but then, really put that into perspective, which I think is great. So yeah, NFTs are interesting. It's a very, very interesting space. I think it is a little bit complicated at the moment for everyone to really understand what it's all about.
It's early. It's very early, Bryan. We're still trying to figure this out as an industry.
But it is. I think
it's a very new space.
It isn't. But again, it's based on digital technology for the future, which I think is great. Everyone's got this.
Well, I have a slightly different way of explaining this to people. Let me give you a sense of this. Okay, so you have NFT 1.0, which I call like the art side of NFT, the stuff that you did. Like the NFT is just a piece of art, it's digital. And then you have NFT 2.0, which is how do you use these NFTs in the real world, access rights, membership clubs, etc., etc. In the NFT 1.0 world, I see an NFT as as you said, a digital piece of art, but it's really like a canvas. Okay, it's a digital canvas. So the Mona Lisa is on a physical canvas, and you could, in theory, the Da Vinci could go and paint, or use a pencil on an iPad and go and sketch something and make it a one of one digitally, and that would be an original. So if you think of like the NFT, the digital NFT as a canvas on a blockchain, it's actually very interesting. It's a new medium for art because the artist still has to create it. It's not like it just comes out of nowhere. I mean, you can obviously have generative art and stuff, but there's an artist behind it. And I think that there's some serious value long term in creating these digital pieces of art by great artists. And I'm part of Proof Collective and a couple other sort of digital art collection, sort of groups. And what we're finding is really it's more of a movement towards digital, where we accept digital as the digital canvas as a native artifact, and we embrace it and say, so if there's enough people in the community that believes that digital art is valuable, it will be valuable. Just in the same way there's a lot of people who believe that physical art is valuable, it is valuable. Now I have a Samsung frame in my home, which is it's like a TV. Basically, it is a TV, but I can load art onto there. So I bought a couple of NFT frames, so I can put, my NFT on a physical frame and hang it up, and now it's digital, and it's the lighting is good backlighting. It's a piece of art, and no one else can do that. I mean, you can take a copy, but then it's a forgery, right? So it's a bit of a cultural shift. And then as NFTs evolve into NFT 2.0, where if you look at things like Moonbirds, they're having a big party in New York next month, and you have to own one of these like $50,000 Moonbirds to get into the party. And so owning that Moonbird gives you access right to the community event. And so these are the things that are changing with NFTs and how it's evolving. It's a very interesting space.
But I mean, if you don't even understand blockchain technology, to now sort of telling people about NFTs and how something has been authenticated and there's only one of one, it becomes very difficult. And for me, it is about educating, letting people understand, but also giving people time to sort of dissolve what's happening, because you sort of bombarding them with so much information over and above everything else that is happening in the world, and you expect people to get NFTs. And 60, 70 years ago, people were all reading newspapers. They were like, you're never ever gonna be able to get this computer into one little phone doing everything. It's not going to happen. People had to unlearn that. There were people that were breaking barriers, and like I say, it's not a process all of a sudden. NFTs are, let's be honest, it's 3-4 years, and we know crypto started in the early part of,
actually it's NFTs are 7 years in. I bought my first NFT in 2015.
No, but what I'm saying again,
but that was early days.
No, but I'm saying, so in South Africa, what I'm saying, so sorry, contextually, but it's like cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency, people thought sort of 2013, but so even before that, if you really go into Hitachi and how he was doing things. So it is about giving people an opportunity to take in all this information, process it, to be able to then come to their own conclusion. And like I said, we're in a world now where you're giving people, to certain points, freedom of speech, but you're giving people the opportunity to understand and engage in ways in which they need to process information before they can make valid decisions. So, just try to push an idea or a concept on them. But the more people start realizing that, again, yes, blockchain technology is practically unregulated regulation in a way, and it's being able to authenticate in the appropriate manner. But there's also then, what has risen from that has been many scams, which, then put a bad light on. So not only NFTs, people like, oh, no, but that, how, if that's the original, how do you digitally make it a copy and then it's one of one? So getting people to understand terms and conditions they've never had to understand previously isn't easy, Vinny. And again, I was skeptical, when I bought my first bit of cryptocurrency back in, I think 2017, and there was a massive market crash. I was like, oh no. That's how I want to be able to rather put my money under my bed, because it's potentially not going to go anywhere. So now I look back and I'm like, oh, Bryan, you idiot! If you just hodled for a little bit longer, you would have just a little bit longer.
But it goes the other way. It goes the other way. You can hodl for too long as well. You can have lots of these coin. Look at Terra Luna. Terra Luna. Who lost so much money on Terra
No.
And I told him, I was on runs, I think 3 weeks ago, saying this is when it breaks, it goes to zero, and like the risk reward ratio of Luna is terrible. But then they held it up from $1 all the way to 120, and then all the way back down. It's heartbreaking.
It is
heartbreaking.
But there's investments that also go bad, and I understand crypto is. It's a very
look at Netflix down 76%.
Nah, it's because
Can you imagine? It's like Netflix.
It's Netflix. Everyone knows Netflix. Netflix will never disappear. But so again, people only see crypto because there's a lot being spoken about. But who knows that are those that are in the know. So it is upskilling, but also allowing people to process the plethora of information that they're receiving on a daily basis. Good, bad, emotional, entangling. That is not ideal as always.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you the one thing I will say is I think that NFTs get to a point where they're fully abstracted from blockchain, where people don't actually even know or care what it's like. You don't really. It's like a browser, like you don't really know what's going on in the back end with TCP/IP, and blockchain becomes a sort of underground thing, which no one has to think about it. And you have NFTs, you have ways of storing them, you have wallets. It might take a while. We never thought that people could get using. I mean, in 1996, when I tried to get people to use the internet, it was like, "What is this browser thing? How does it work? Clicking links is all freaky." And now it's kind of commonplace. And I think we have a big enough youth population that's interested in this area, and willing to learn. That I think NFTs, continue to grow as a standalone. Apart from blockchain.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about 96 and telling people about the internet. I mean, like. 99 was approaching, and Y2K, everyone was like, the world's gonna end. The world's gonna end. The data processing principles.
That was ignorance, though. That was largely ignorance. No. We just didn't know. We know 100 times more today than what we knew back then. 1,000 times.
I was about to say maybe even more than 1,000. Yeah, maybe 10,000. It's exponential. What the growth.
Yeah. But the knowledge is this. We have distributed knowledge now. We have knowledge around the world. We have subject matter experts in certain areas. So it's really. I think that we still know very little about blockchain. I mean, think about it. It's been around for 10 years. That's it. 12 years.
Crazy. And like I said, I think there is just so much information, and much like all the good and the bad that's happening in the world, it's where are you getting your information sources from? How are you verifying and vetting that information that you're receiving? If you're just watching a certain news channel that potentially has a certain messaging track, in comparison to another one, if you're only listening to one audio, and there's just so much information available on the internet. How do you actually scan, conceptualize, process, and come to a conclusion? It's that is also just in itself not an easy way of doing things. And like I said, it's just so much out there, and unfortunately, so many people have got hurt or have lost lots of money. And people, not all people are good. So there are people out there looking to scam people. We all get these SMSs that says like you've got you must come fetch your wealth from a deceased person somewhere on the other side of the African continent, and you then become skeptical. And I think the same is done because you do a little bit of homework or you understand. But there's just so many people that do get bitten, and I think sometimes when it is too good to be true, it generally is, unfortunately, in life. So
there's no free money.
Unfortunately not. And you, Brian, I know I'm the sort of the host, but I mean, how's the family? I know you moved to San Diego, and are you still there now? Sorry, just give me a bit of.
Yeah. No. So we moved to San Diego in 2019. Actually, 18. November 2018. Yeah, and then it was an interesting transition out of the Bay Area and Silicon Valley. Obviously, at the time, the Bay Area was peaking in terms of traffic and overpopulation, and I just want to get out of there. And so San Diego is great. Southern California, it's an hour and 45 minutes from LA. If you drive at night, outside peak hours, it's great. So I get to enjoy that part of the world. I'm in Miami now for a couple of conferences. I'll be traveling to London and Singapore in July. But being based in San Diego, I think is great because it's very like Cape Town vibes, right? Okay. Very laid back and chilled, and because of in fact, living in San Diego maybe come up with the Waitroom idea, because I was doing insane amount of video calls during COVID, because there was no travel. And what I found was it was way more effective for me to try and figure out a way to get people to line up and have lots of 5 or 10 minute conversations in an hour, as opposed to trying to schedule. You know what is scheduling? You know how to schedule a 10, 20-minute conversation, even with employees. It's just really hard to say, hey,
even with their own
you can have 5 minutes of my time.
Even with their own family members.
Yeah. Exactly. It's just hard to catch up with people. Okay. So that was where Waitroom was born from. I think we've developed a really great platform. I've got a phenomenal team. The tools, it's getting better and better right now. There's a lot of improvements we're going to make to it. But, the sessions like this are just ready to get the word out, get people trying to use it, see what it's like. And, it's one of those things where if you were using this in your own company or with your own, potentially your customers or whatever, you could have, 20 or 30 quick conversations, in an hour, and go through people, get people to give you feedback. And we use it internally. We can use it for stand-ups. Bigger companies can use it for sort of town hall meetings, and then having, think about it, like the way we're doing this right now. If this was a company event and these are all employees, you basically have a situation where we're discussing the future of the company, etc., maybe showing a presentation, and people could line up to ask questions, but everyone only gets 2 or 3 minutes. So it doesn't eat all the time up, because having someone on screen for like 20 minutes, then the meeting's over. And so it's for micro meetings, and that's the original thought behind Waitroom.
And then obviously just from a roadmap perspective, and again, the likes of a Teams, a Zoom, which you're potentially competing with, but also potentially those, personalization video type environments, the likes of a Cameo. We have my fan pocket in South Africa. I'm assuming that athletes, celebrities, are going to get the opportunity to sign up, potential commercial model in terms of that. But it is testing the water, understanding what it's like, getting feedback to continuously improve, and get to a point where, you're saying, listen, because unfortunately, and I think where this world is in, your time is costly, and there is a certain element of like, okay, well, let's do this. But I'm assuming that's sort of, on the long-term strategy for Waitroom.
Yeah, so I would say it's probably more shorter term than that. We have this a bit. So after every session, like Lou spoke and Sean spoke, etc., there's a clip. That clip gets sent to your account afterwards, and you can share on social media. So they can go and share the 2.5 minutes that they had a chat with you, and so you're able to disseminate the information in more sort of atomized chunks. Yeah, it's more concise. So when you have a specific topic, and especially with internal, even like a Cameo style model where, hey, we want to discuss a certain topic on a certain day, you can get those clips sent to you, and you can send them out from there.
Very, very cool. And I mean, just in terms of the growth, and again, people, for those, I know there's not many on the call, there's not quite the 500 of Lucy's, but yes, Vinny, in terms of, getting the word out there, letting people understand, I mean, what are the channels, is there Instagram accounts, is there Facebook, Twitter, what are the sort of current social media platforms, are some of the Gaylords doing TikToks at the moment to try increase the social media presence?
No, I think where we are right now is, the platform works really well. It more as a bring your own audience model, which Vusi obviously has a great audience, so it translates. And so we have to still figure out from Waitroom side is how do we get people who have these large audiences who want to engage with them to follow them into a room and chat them. And Vusi is very different because remember he's kind of like a motivational speaker type of guy where he does. He's helping people with their businesses or their ideas or investing, and so he has an audience of people who like kind of cling on to every word he says because they inspire him to. And it's kind of a work thing, right?
Yeah.
And they want to come ask him questions, or they maybe want to get some investment from him. So that's a different dynamic to hey, Vinny and Bryan are having a little fireside chat and come and ask a question, etc. And it's a different type of engagement.
Yeah.
So we have to figure out like who are the who are the types of people that people want to sort of come chat to, and that's why I think as we play this out, moving to more one of the things we're bringing out is private queues.
Yeah.
So you could actually go and say we're going to have a press conference for the next Sevens Rugby World Cup, and every day we have a press conference, and these are the press members of the press that are allowed to join the room, and everyone. And they all get like 2 minutes each, and they line up, and it goes rapid fire one after another. And in an hour, everyone gets to ask a question, one question, two or whatever, 2 minutes of airtime with you or whoever they want to interview.
Yeah.
And those are all clipped and shared. And actually, the nice thing about press junkets with that is that the people, the journalists watching, they get to see what other people are asking, so they don't have to waste your time with the same question twice. Versus these one-on-one interviews don't really work. You've done how many interviews that you come in, they ask you the same question. So like, it's still one-on-one, but I think it's an example of use cases we're exploring. We think it's really interesting, and so private queues is one of the things we're building out.
Very, very cool, Vinny. Awesome. No, thanks for some.
Thank you for your time today.
Thanks for. I know we had about sort of between 25 and 32 guests over the course of this hour.
Yeah.
And I think just from my end, again, blatant feedback, it actually goes a lot quicker than you think because it's conversational. When you're sitting in a Zoom or you're always constantly looking at the clock. But I think now because the clock's almost there for you and you say, listen, I need to answer this because there's a queue of 5 or 10 people, you got 2.5 minutes. So you're working that out and you seeing the timer go, and not only are you seeing it, but the person asking the question. So it's actually really cool and goes by a lot quicker than what you think, because when it's conversational and not presentational, I think it's just more fluid and easygoing in a way, and it becomes a lot more authentic, where if you have a presentation on the screen and you're sort of going through the processes, yes, you're trying to make it exciting and engaging, but this is just chatting, this is just enjoying it, and people get to see you potentially in your own habitat, which is not always true, which I think is also great.
No, this is great. And Bryan, thank you so much for your time. You've been so generous today with it. And I think everyone who's been in the queue has really enjoyed it, and the viewers watching it. And we hope to have you on again soon. And any last parting words for the viewers?
Yeah, I think for the viewers, in this world that is ever changing, ever fluid and volatile, I think, please be safe and look after yourself. I think in South Africa, we've got a lot of problems, and I think the only way we can get out of it is that as individuals, we know that we can make the difference. And are you waking up every morning and choosing positive? Because I think this world absolutely needs positive. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for listening in for the last hour, and hoping we see each other on a Waitroom in the not too distant future again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Bryan. See you soon, mate.
As well. Go well.